Hey guys, welcome once again to another episode of Survive to Thrive TV. My name is Jay Maney. I'm here today to tell you that if you are not able to grab a piece of paper and a pen to take good notes, then I'm going to ask you, go ahead and do that right now, because this episode is going to be one that will be for the ages. I promise you what you're going to hear today is going to be one of these episodes that's going to give you a chance to look back upon the things you've learned today and apply them immediately because of the content we're going to cover. I'm excited because Steve Siebold is here as our guest for today's show. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Steve Siebold here is because of not only the quality of person he is, as I've gotten to know him even better. This guy's the real McCoy. He's a real great guy and just a servant's heart. And I really appreciate that about him. But apart from that, he is one of the most recognized, one of the most authority figures on the subject of world-class thinking, how rich people think, habits to change for peak performance, and so on and so forth.
That's just because I'm old.
That's right, exactly.
After a while, he just takes over from,
Well, I was going to say, his adult life, he's dedicated to that. So you're going to find out very, very quickly why he is at the peak state of stardom that he is in the industry. He's done over 1,000 interviews and podcasts and radio shows, and for good reason. He's an author of multiple books, bestsellers. His recent one we're going to talk about a little bit today, which is why I wanted him on the show. As a parent, I appreciate what he's written in his latest book. But I got the chance to read Steve's book back about 10 years ago. I didn't know much about Steve. I'd heard his name in circles because you can't go very far in major conventions and not hear his name. But I got my hands on this book, 177 Mental Tough Secrets for the World Class. And when I got my hands on this book, it was given to me as a gift. And I looked at it and I said, this book is pretty thick. And I said, look at this guy, Steve. He's wrapping his cover around the Bible. But the wisdom in it is comparable to what's written in the Bible. And I tell you what, if you haven't had a chance to go pick up that book, it's going to change your life as it did mine. So for me, it's a privilege today to have Steve on the show. Steve, I want to spend a little bit of time here really giving our viewers an understanding of some of the work you've done over the last 20 years. And then I want to dive into the book you've just written, Secrets that Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids. As a parent, I value what you've done here. But just take about a minute or two and kind of share with our viewers who you are and what's brought you to this place.
Well, in the 80s, I was a professional tennis player for a couple of years. And then I retired and started coaching professional tennis players. People like, my most famous person was Andre Agassi. I was part of a team of people that coached with him. Jim Courier, some of the other top people of those days. This is 30 years ago, pretty much. And so then I started working with Olympic athletes and professional athletes on mental toughness and psychological performance training. And I had some of the best in the world for about 10 years. Okay. And then about 20 years ago, we shifted over to major corporations, the Johnson & Johnsons, the Procter & Gamble's, Microsofts, those kinds of companies, and started training their sales teams in psychological performance training to help them sell more. Okay. And we've had, luckily, we've had real good success with that over the years, and that's mostly what we do now.
Okay. You've actually, on social media, if you're on any of the social media sites, guys, every now and then you'll see posts that Steve has with Bill Gove, Bob Proctor. This is when you're in your younger days.
Right, right.
So the quality of Steve and who he has surrounded himself with has made him the kind of person that he is today. And so I really appreciate you being here.
It's a scary thing.
I know. He's got a sense of humor, too. As a parent, I've got 3 kids. I've got a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and an 8-year-old who thinks he's 28, right? And he gives me a run for my money, much more than the older kids. But I relate to the book because I wrote an article about 6 months ago. It was called, From a Parent Standpoint, How to Raise Entrepreneurial Kids. All of my 3 kids, my older daughter is photography. She's got a photography business. My young son is personal fitness. And my little guy tries to sell me on giving him money to clean his room. Right? So he's an entrepreneur.
It's genius right there. Yeah, I love it.
So I've been raising them to think like an entrepreneur. But your book takes it to the next level. Because your book actually taps into the mindset and the thinking of self-made millionaires and what they teach their kids. Now, guys, I'm going to warn you on this. The book is fantastic. All of Steve's books are fantastic. But if you're planning on highlighting, you're going to run out of highlight long before you run out of book. So buy multiple highlights. Because just about everything is incredible that deserves to be highlighted. But for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to just kind of share with you, since I'm conducting the interview, right, the 5 points of the book that I thought were so compelling that I wanted you to take some time and share with our viewers what you've learned from picking the brains of these self-made millionaires, and as a parent, what lessons we could teach our kids, or have them read it as you wrote in the book. The book wasn't written for kids. It wasn't written for adults. It was written to kids, and hopefully to be read to them by the adults if they're too young. And powerful stuff. I don't think there's another book out there like this at all. I don't think there is. But one of the things you talked about was, as a lesson, is you have to decide what excites you the most. What's the passion of your heart? And to captivate that and to decide what that is and then go from there. Share a little bit about that particular concept.
Sure. And one thing that people think sometimes when they read this book is that these are just my opinions, and I have opinions like everyone else. But they're based on 34 years experience that it took to put into this book. I started interviewing, as you know, Jay, self-made millionaires in 1984 when I was broke, I wanted to be rich, and so I started interviewing rich people thinking that'd be a good way to do it. And so this is one of the questions I asked them for the last 34 years and continue to interview people, rich people. All self-made rich is what do the rich teach their kids about money and wealth and prosperity that the average person does not. So this book is based on all those answers from 34 years. They're not just my opinions. Most of them are not my opinions. But in terms of loving what you do and really finding something you're passionate about, I think that might be the greatest secret of self-made millionaires, because people say all the time, they say, well, they're workhorses, they're super ambitious, their ambition is unbridled, and those kinds of things. They're workaholics. And the truth is, at least as I've seen it, Jay, is that yes, they do work a lot, there's no question, but they're doing something they love to do. And I think that's the key ingredient is that they're, when you're doing something you love to do, as my late business partner Bill Gove used to say, the only reward you really need is the experience of doing it. And because you want to do it, you get good at it. And when you get good at it, you can get rich doing it. So it's kind of I think, if they were working at something they didn't like, I don't think they would get rich.
Yes, that's brilliant. You really have to love what you do, and based on that, you'll get rich. Gold gems in this book. By the way, there's 160. We were just talking about that. There's 160 chapters. I don't even think they're chapters. They're just pearls of wisdom. 160. So if you get 140 of them wrong, you still have a shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but the next lesson you talked about was success isn't free. And boy, when I read that chapter, guys, it was like I was reading my life story, because I've lived that particular lesson. And I could tell you the part about being battle tested, this dude is battle tested, right? In fact, I don't want to be tested with any more battles.
Yeah.
But share a little bit about why you wrote that success isn't free.
Well, that's one of the things that they told me in the interviews, and continue to this day to tell me in the interviews, is that you're going to have to fight for this. I mean, it's not something that we're entitled to, or it's just going to fall in our laps, or we're going to win the lottery, or I think there's a pervasive idea out in society in America, especially, that someone is going to come along and make you rich. You're going to strike, your ship's going to come in, and you're going to strike gold all of a sudden. And that's usually not the way it happens. You're going to have to really fight for this. I mean, you're going to have to fight for your financial freedom, and you're going to have to sacrifice. And when other people are playing, you're going to have to be working. And when other people are goofing around and going to parties and drinking and carrying on and all that stuff, you're probably going to have to spend a lot of time working during. I mean, I remember doing that probably just like you do. My friends are like, hey, come with us, man. We're going to the bar. We're going bowling. We're going here. And I'm not saying you can't do some of that stuff, and I certainly did some of that stuff, of course. But a lot of times you can't. Yeah. And, now, of course, then when you become successful, then those people are saying, oh, I should have done the same thing. I must hear that. I don't know how many times. Everyone that's at some measure of success, I think, hears that from people that kind of were goofing around their whole lives, and all of a sudden now they don't really have anything. But you're going to have to fight for it. I mean, I think it's good to tell kids that, what they're in for right away. And then if they want to do it, great. And if they don't, then that's fine too. Yeah.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with my kids multiple times, and one of the things I share with them is that anything worthwhile is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be free. In fact, I shot a video about 2 months ago, and it was titled Accept the Hard. And then I come across your chapter. One of the lessons here talks about think hard, right? Think hard. But I want you to elaborate on the lesson here that you spoke of in that chapter. You talked about developing the habit of perpetual thought. I'd never heard that. And I thought to myself, if there's ever a topic I wanted Steve to share with our viewers, that would be one of them. So go ahead and share, if you could, just a snippet of what it means to have perpetual thought.
Well, I think if you look at the foundation of every self-made millionaire in a free market like a free market economy like America, it's really about solving a problem, or solving problems, depending. And the bigger problem you solve, the richer you get. So I think that what I've seen self-made millionaires do over the 30-plus years I've been interviewing them is that they focus on the problem or problems that they need to solve, and then they think about possible solutions perpetually. I mean, they just never turn it off, And so they're constantly waking up in the middle of the night, taking a shower, thinking about it, working out, doing whatever they're doing. When other people are worried about, gee, you think we're going to win the Super Bowl this year? You think we're going to be in the playoffs? Yeah. They're sitting there watching the game going, yeah, this is really great. Hey, I've got this idea. I might want to try this. And their machine, their thought machine is constantly on. So when most people are thinking about solving problems 8 hours a day, they're thinking about it 16 hours a day. During all their waking hours are pretty close. So how do you compete with that? You really can't. So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and the middle class kind of is wondering how the rich are pulling a rabbit out of a hat. And they're not. They're doing a set of things very differently, and they're getting a different result.
It's funny. When I get home, I'm going to have a conversation with my wife and say, honey, here's the reason why I'm always on, because I'm a perpetual thinker.
That's it, yeah. It works well.
She tells me, could you please shut it down?
She may slap you. You never know, though.
Could you please shut it down?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're constantly on.
My wife says, you're going to hurt yourself. Watch it.
I mean, it's very difficult to turn it off when you are constantly thinking about progress and what's the next step. And I related to that chapter very well. You spoke about a lesson here that I thought was very, very key. You talk about the masses and how the masses have a certain way to think and a certain way to process information. You've written about that in a number of your other books. But you also talk about how self-made millionaires think also, but how they think differently regarding success. The masses have their own perception of what they think success is, and self-made millionaires have their own perception. And how they teach their kids what success is. And if you could share that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I read a lot about the masses and what I call middle-class thinking, because that's where I really come from, like most of us do. And I wanted to get away from that because I grew up with a bunch of rich kids. I was not a rich kid, but I grew up in Chicago around kids that played competitive tennis. I was a competitive tennis player as a kid, and I traveled all over the country. We were not a rich family, but a lot of the families I traveled with were rich. And I spent my whole childhood with these people, and they come up in limousines, and they got tennis courts in their backyard, and they live in, these mansions, and they have, they go to private schools. And I mean, I thought, that's cool. I want to do that, And I realized that I was part of the mass consciousness, and they were part of the class consciousness. They were being taught by their parents something very different because they came from prosperity. And it's a night and day kind of a thing. So I think that the differences in thinking between the middle class or the masses, let's say, and the self-made rich are like night and day. They could live right next to each other in the same neighborhood, but the way they think, it's almost like they're from another planet. And I think if you can teach your kids to make the distinction between the two, not to say they're better people. I mean, rich people certainly aren't any better than anybody else, but to teach them that the thought processes lead to behaviors, and the behaviors lead to results. And if you can become a self-made millionaire and you have that in your mind, well, I think the advantage is you're no better than anybody else, obviously, or anything. You're not going to be happier necessarily, but you can give yourself a life of what I call unrestricted existence. You can do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want, and you don't really have to ask permission from anyone. And I always thought that was pretty cool. That's really what I wanted. That's what I went after.
It's called freedom. Not having to ask permission from anyone. Unrestricted living. AKA freedom. That's really the ultimate play here that is worth fighting for. So we work hard, think hard, understand the difference between success and find your passion. But in the end, one of the lessons that was very key that I thought was among all of them was when you talked about that the wealthy, the self-made rich, understand the value of taking time out to enjoy it, to enjoy the ride. And you having had a chance to talk with so many of them, kind of elaborate a little bit on what enjoying the ride is to them and how they send that message down onto their kids.
Sure. One of the distinctions I made in the late 80s as I was interviewing all these people was I made a distinction, what I called the upper class consciousness, which is kind of an ego, Wall Street, kind of not to put down Wall Street, but I know a lot of people on Wall Street, probably like you do, that they go 24 hours a day. They make obviously lots of money. They're very successful, and it's all great. Nothing wrong with it. But it's never enough. And then I met these people that I kind of labeled the world class, where they knew when enough was enough. I mean, it's the old Gordon Gekko thing. How many yachts can you water ski behind? Great line, you know. I never forgot that. A lot of people know that line. But it really is kind of true. And it's always the answer is, when is it enough? When I'd interview them, the upper class, they'd say more. Always more and more and more. It doesn't matter how much they have. And sometimes I'd say, you know, you're worth whatever they were worth, crazy $300 million, whatever it was. And they'd say, so what are you going to do with 400 that you can't do with 300? And they'd say, it doesn't matter. It's not it's a game, and I want more and more and more. But at the end of the day, I found that they weren't very fulfilled. And the studies all say they weren't, and I've been a part of a lot of studies over the years, psychological studies with major universities, to find out if they were fulfilled and happy. They're rich. There's no question about that. Nice people, they're rich. But they're not fulfilled because they've never spiked the ball in the end zone. Whereas the world class kind of say, you know what, I've got enough. I'm going to keep doing this, but I'm going to take some time and play with my kids and enjoy our prosperity and take some time off. And maybe I don't end up being the richest person in the world, or maybe I do, but I'm going to enjoy it and say that, you know what, you can't buy everything in life. You know, not everything. A lot of things are for sale. There's no question, right? But spending time with your kids, watching your kids grow up, with your spouse, enjoying your family, you know, being around, having great relationships, friends, that type of thing. I mean, you can't really buy that, no matter how rich you are. And you can't buy your health a lot of times either. So I think that the world class realize that, and they take time out to smell the roses. It's not just about another dollar, you know, because money obviously has limits. And I think a lot of people really don't realize that. And so that's in the book. I try to talk about, teach your kids that money is not going to solve everything. It has limits.
And not only that, one of the things that, just to piggyback on what you just said, having the opportunity to do well affords you the opportunity to take the time off to enjoy what you work so hard for. What's the use in working so hard for something? Sure. If you don't take the time out to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Sure. Right? Yeah. And I've met people like that as well. Guys, I want to encourage you. The name of the book, The Secrets Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids. Number one, if you're a parent, you need to read this. Number two, if you're not a parent, it doesn't matter. You need to read this because some of the lessons here are so applicable to adults.
I hope they buy it too, because I need a bus ticket home while I'll be walking. Go buy the book. I need a bus ticket.
I'll give you a ride.
Okay, you'll charge me though. You'll charge more than the bus. Yeah, well, you New Yorkers are tough, man.
My 8-year-old son will charge you. It's a fabulous read. I totally encourage you. If your kids are old enough to read it, give them a copy. All of my kids now, we're going through these lessons as you talk about. Take one lesson a day and spend time with your kids, explaining to them how to really change the way they think from those who have done extremely well in life. So,
and there's a workbook in there people can download. It's not in the book, but it's online. That if you go to a website and it's in the book, and you can download a free workbook and have your kids fill it out. A lot of people are doing that all over the country.
Yeah, you've got at the end of the chapters, you've got your quote, you've got the workbook, you've got a thought question. I mean, it's very, very well done. Very, very well done. Steve, where can people find you, find more of your material? I mean, you've got a lot going on, but just let our viewers know where they can get more information about you, mental toughness, your books, and so on. Sure.
Probably the two places people go most are one of our blogs is mentaltoughnessblog.com. Mentaltoughnessblog.com. It's a video blog. And the books, of course, all my books are available on Amazon.
Okay, excellent. Guys, I appreciate you being here to watch this next episode of Survive to Thrive TV. Let me ask you this is the video to share with your friends. Hit the share button, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch up with you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching.